Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley, joined by Josh McCafferty today. We're here to chat through all the latest Celtic news and events, and of course, it's been unfortunately another dramatic 24 hours for Celtic. It's not quite a happy Hogmanay. We're at the end of the year. We're heading into a new year, but there's more questions than answers at Celtic at the moment, and it's not going particularly well. I'm going to bring in Josh's opinions in a few minutes. I'm just going to set the tone for the discussion ahead with the kind of what's been swimming through my head over the last 12 or so hours. Celtic lost 2-0 at Motherwell, of course, and Wilfried Nancy is a man under immense pressure. I don't even know if it goes beyond pressure right now, Josh, but the thing for me is that this isn't heading in the right direction, and for all the kind of small positives or silver linings you could have taken from some of the other matches under Wilfried Nancy's tenure, I think last night there was just no positives to take from it at all, and it leaves Celtic in this terrible situation of their own making where they're caught between doubling down on a guy in the January transfer window with a team that he's not getting any sort of function out of, or admitting they've made a horrendous mistake in appointing him and letting go of a manager on a multi-year contract after 7 matches, because that's all he's been in charge for, 7 matches, but he's lost 5 of the games. Now, I said after the St Mirren game, which was 3 matches in after that horrendous week, I said after that St Mirren Cup final that I would maybe give him 10 games to show what he can do, show what he can do as manager, show if there's any improvement or ongoing improvement. Now, we're 7 games in, 3 games to go in that 10-game mark, but I can't really see things getting better, Josh, and that's the big worry for me. And I'm, as well, Josh, I'm not like a knee-jerk reaction guy. I don't really lurch to extremes. But I've been asking myself 2 questions over the last 12 hours or so. Is this the worst run of form and performances and results that I've ever seen Celtic go on in my lifetime? And objectively, the answer to that is yes. And was that post-match interview after Motherwell one of the worst interviews I've ever seen a Celtic manager give in my lifetime? And unfortunately, the answer again to that is yes. So it leaves Celtic, as I say, in this untenable position about where they go forward from here. And it doesn't seem, for the Celtic support, for almost every fan that I'm seeing in the wake of this, that at least anywhere but Wilfried Nancy has to go and leave Celtic in this situation of an incredible mismanagement and kind of rudderless situation going into the new year.
Yeah, it's not an ideal situation. Good morning, everyone. I thought just on the game itself last night, it felt as if Celtic were playing one of those modern up-and-coming European teams, such as Midtjylland, such as Bodo Glimt, and they just couldn't get anywhere near it. Like you said, I was texting you last night, so we were both working, and I was listening to Wilfried Nancy's interviews on Sports Sound, Premier Sports, and then listened to the press conference, full press conference, which you can read on the Celtic Way, and some of the comments were just baffling, in my opinion. To say that he wasn't surprised that Celtic lost the game was quite strange to me. Now, I think the likes of me and you, John, and a lot of other observers weren't surprised that Celtic lost the game. But for the manager to come out and say that publicly is damning. I just don't think you can do that. Celtic didn't get near Motherwell. Even in the second half, when they seemed to dominate proceedings, really, they couldn't create anything. Michael Stewart described the setup defensively on commentary as kamikaze, and it's very difficult to disagree with him. Austin Trusty was getting left man for man at the back with Ibrahim Said, and there was just a wave of anxiety going through your body every time Motherwell got it forward. Wilfried
There was a wave of anxiety going through the Celtic defenders' bodies, Josh.
Yeah, exactly. And Celtic, I can recall one big chance in the whole game, and that was Shin Yamada's opportunity, half chance even, the beginning of the second half. And looking at Rangers against Motherwell only a couple of days prior, they managed to create an XG of above 4 in that game against Motherwell, created 7 big chances, 13 shots on target. That is just damning for Wilfried Nancy as a coach, that he wasn't able to find out a way to break down that Motherwell team and find a way for Celtic to win the match. But he had a very defeatist attitude going into it, going by his post-match comments, and that he recognised it was going to be a difficult game. But which is such a bad attitude, in my opinion, for a Celtic manager to have. So it's dire straits at the minute. I think the club are caught between a rock and a hard place, because it was just a fortnight ago, before that game at Tannadice, that Michael Nicholson came out in an interview and publicly backed Wilfried Nancy. So 2 weeks on to then sack him ahead of a January transfer window would be embarrassing for him and the Celtic board. So do they either do that or do they double down on a guy who clearly seems partly out of his depth in some aspects, in some regards, and then get a new interim manager in? It would probably be Martin O'Neill, with a January transfer window that opens in less than 24 hours. And they probably have, or what we're led to believe is targets lined up that could be coming in, who Wilfried Nancy's probably given the green light to sign. So it would rupture all of those plans as well. So, yeah, it's a really bad situation.
Yeah, and I think what's so galling, Josh, is like you talk about this rock in a hard place. It's a rock that Celtic have placed there and a hard place that they've built, and they find themselves caught, as you say, in this. I don't think either scenario particularly reflects well on the club or is an ideal solution. I also think that it's unfathomable to me that this guy, if there's a defeat to Rangers at the weekend, for example, at Celtic Park, that he could ever have the credibility to ever manage Celtic going forward, because he's already lost the credibility for a large section of supporters. Increasingly, a lot of feeling around the situation that maybe he's lost or never had that credibility with the players either. Now, one of the things you touched on there was just the chance creation last night. And I think really when you look at the games, even the games that he'd lost in the early stages, the chance creation was there in parts. Now, I think the St Mirren final was a pretty disgraceful performance all in. Certainly, I think the St Mirren final and last night have been the two worst performances under Wilfried Nancy. But you look at the Hearts game, the Dundee United game, even the Roma game to an extent, there was elements of chance creation there where what you could say almost as an excuse in hindsight, or almost as a kind of justification at the time of why things might turn around, is that the Celtic were creating chances and there was these glaring opportunities that certain players missed. I think in the Dundee United game in particular was an astonishing game. Johnny Kenny missing, a sitter in the middle of the goal. Diza Maeda missing a header that he sticks away or should stick away 9 times out of 10 almost. You could say, Celtic are creating chances. They just need a striker. They just need the right guy in there. But against Motherwell, they were just outplayed last night, Josh, completely. As I say, no chance creation. I think when you play in this, you described it or alluded to it being something of kamikaze defending. It leaves no margin for error. You need to be fully functional and on fire in an attacking sense to counteract the space and the instability that you're leaving at the back. And when you don't have that chance creation or you don't have someone sticking away those chances, as I say, the margin of error just completely is eroded. And that's an unsustainable way to build a football club and move forward as a football club, especially as a new manager, Josh. That's the problem for me. He came in with this talk of, I'm not going to change everything. I'm going to take everything a step at a time. He's used the word nuance about 99 times. And he's talked about these subtle changes that he's wanting to make to Celtic, but it's not true. Everyone can see on the pitch the changes that he's made. Everyone can see the instability that he directly has caused with the way that he's asking these players to play. And the fact that Celtic at times only have one centre-back on the pitch. Granted, last night they didn't look any more secure with Liam Scales and Austin Trusty in the team. But the point is that the defensive instability is of Wilfried Nancy's own making. This isn't something that he's been lumbered with. And he talks about, he said last night, and again, what you're saying in terms of his media comments was that he went into this with a defeatist attitude of Motherwell were just too hard to play last night. Now, yeah, of course, Motherwell were always going to give Celtic a tough game. They're a pretty good outfit this season. They're working well. But you can't go into a match as a Celtic manager and feel resigned to defeat against Motherwell or any team in the Scottish Premiership. That's just not how it works. And that was the most worrying aspect of his post-match comments for me, Josh. Again, he also explained his his substitutions at half-time with he'd always planned to give Diza Maeda and Kieran Tierney just 45 minutes. Well, that's fine, but again, that's not really how this Celtic team has to function at the moment, just with the amount of games. I don't think you can put a player in for a half and say you're only going to get 45 minutes and expect them to give their all and have a performance that helps take apart a team across a whole 90 minutes.
Yeah, and how does that play into the psychology of those players when they're coming out the tunnel at the start of the game and they know they're going to be off in 45 minutes? And I just don't get it. I think Russell Martin spoke about that near the beginning of the season, but he was talking about the minute load of players. So some comparisons.
I understand that, Josh, and I understand Celtic squad isn't in the best position. You've got to manage, because we don't want players picking up injuries. But I think you either make a decision to start a player or not. You don't go, a player's looking very tired, they've run too much, oh, but we'll give him a half a football. I don't think I've seen that much at Celtic over the last few years.
I don't think I've seen it at any club, never mind Celtic. Maybe see it in pre-season, but this is the middle of a campaign. So very, very strange. I thought Celtic had turned a corner under Wilfried Nancy after the games against Aberdeen and Livingston. Going forward, attacking wise, they were playing really good. Some of the, like you and I would agree, that some of the best attacking football they've played all season. The relations seem to be there between the players going forward at the top end of the park. But last night it was just completely non-existent. I don't understand how they can just go from that against Aberdeen, Livingston, albeit it's 10-man Aberdeen for a half. But for the first half, even with 11 men, Celtic were dominating them. Then against Livingston, for the majority of the game, they were playing some good stuff. Then how they can just go to a completely poor performance last night and not create anything in the way of goal-scoring opportunities at all. It's quite incredible. I feel sorry to a certain extent for Wilfried Nancy, because he's came halfway across the world. It's an opportunity that he himself, as a coach, as a guy, as a professional football manager, is never going to turn down. And he's come into this goldfish bowl environment where everything he does is scrutinised. But part of that, when you do come here, and you need to learn that, and you need to do your research into teams like Motherwell, into all the teams you face. And it seems like he was a bit arrogant when he came in initially with this 3 at the back system. Thought the Celtic players were going to be able to adapt it very quickly. I think he was probably surprised by the level of some of the players that he's working with, and whether they're able to go into his system immediately. And just changing everything that he'd done. Like you said earlier that he was directly responsible for the St Mirren Cup final. Completely agree with that. And I think for most of the bad things that have happened, he's directly responsible. I mean, you can't blame Wilfried Nancy for Kasper Schmeichel giving the ball away inside his own box last night, but you can blame Wilfried Nancy for the level of performance, and the performance was nowhere near one that was going to get Celtic a result. The thing is, they're only 3 points behind Hearts halfway through the season. And if you get rid of Wilfried Nancy and you got in a new interim manager, or a manager who can get results out of this team and these players, the season is still salvageable. You could still go and win a double in the second half of the season. And I think that's one of the most, not frustrating, I would say frustrating is probably the word for the majority of the supporters, because they know that is still there for the take, and the season could still be somewhat of a success. But under Wilfried Nancy, I just can't see how that success is going to come.
Yeah. And listen, I agree with you, right? I think, so after the first week, I think that's when I felt sorry for Wilfried Nancy. Those first 3 games where he was put into this situation and he arrived in the storm in the wake of Matt O'Neill, it was hard not to feel sorry for him. It was almost an extent hard not to feel sorry for him when he's walking down the touchline at Tannadice and there's fans chanting and there's opposition fans chanting and it's a desperate situation. You can't continue to feel sorry for someone when they don't seem to have it within themselves to acknowledge their deficiencies, or the way that they're doing things is not working, when you have the responsibility of taking a football club like Celtic forward. Now, he's paid very well for his role. He's in place to find solutions to the problems that we're seeing on the pitch. He constantly says, I want to help the players. I don't think, for me personally, I can't continue to feel sorry for him when he's just not shown anything in terms of being willing to change anything about his approach and how he goes about things. He just seems to be wanting to bend players to his will, almost, which is not a good situation for a manager to be in if it's not working. Now, yes, there is context around all of this, and all of the issues that we talked about before Wilfried Nancy came in still exist. But unfortunately for Wilfried Nancy, he's part of the problem now. Whereas in the first week, you might go, look, it's this first week, he's just in the door, he needs to figure out things, he needs to get to know the players a bit better. Yeah, and again, it's still very early, and maybe in an ideal world, a manager has a couple of months to get up and running, but not really at Celtic, and that historically has not been the case, really. And that's my worry now going forward with Wilfried Nancy, is that he just is lost and is out of his depth. And these are not phrases or descriptions I like to use about any Celtic manager. A Celtic manager that's in the door for 5 years, never mind a manager that's in the door for 7. But the way that it's gone and the evidence that you see, and if you take everything that you're seeing on a game-by-game basis and actually what has happened, without even trying to predict the next 5 or 6 fixtures, Josh, what has happened is that Celtic have never looked convincing on Wilfried Nancy, even in the games. And again, I was happy to take the positives out of the wins over Aberdeen and Livingston, but even in those games, there were signs of this defensive frailty and complete disorganisation. And again, when you don't have the chance creation to back that up, it's only going to end one way. And I don't think Celtic have the personnel or the players or the staff in reality to guide this set of players through the way Wilfried Nancy wants to play. And if he's so fixed on that and isn't showing any self-awareness at all to change anything, then I can't feel sorry for him. And it's not personal. But again, like you just said, Josh, it's about salvaging the season, isn't it? It's about taking, Celtic are a sporting club, they're a competitive outfit. It's about making sure that Celtic are in the best position possible to win football matches and ultimately win Silverbear, ultimately entertain supporters. And right now, I don't think there's any sign that Wilfried Nancy is the man that can do that. And that's the brutal reality of it.
Yeah, you can only go off evidence, and it's a results-driven business at the end of the day. And to have a 28.5% win rate from your first 7 games as Celtic manager is just simply not good enough, because I think 7 games is a fair enough sample size. But if Wilfried Nancy does eventually go in the next couple of days or weeks, whatever happens, whoever was responsible for putting him in place in the first instance there has to be questions asked of them as well, because you can't just take him as the sole problem and replace him and think everything's going to be okay. The people who were responsible for either recommending him to the club, who did their due diligence on this guy and eventually came to the decision of appointing him as Celtic manager, and they thought he was going to be a good fit, then frankly for me, they probably have to leave the football club as well, because does
that accountability exist though, Josh? I mean, I think we're talking about Paul Tisdale to an extent here, but is there accountability beyond Paul Tisdale? For me, there's no, what happens with Michael Nicholls, and as he says so publicly, backing Wilfried Nancy. Now, he didn't sit beside him in a press conference, but he was the man in the videos welcoming him to Lennox Town. Again, he's the man who's been out there kind of defending him and saying, this is the starting point now, we're backing him going into January. There's no accountability there for me. I don't think it's, as much as certain Celtic supporters want him to leave, I don't think it's realistic that Michael Nicholson is going to be binned. And then, again, we know that Dermot Desmond's heavily involved in these decisions, Josh, and there's no accountability when it comes to Dermot Desmond. He's a man who can do pretty much what he wants. It's a crazy situation.
Yeah, this is, like you say, as much as it should happen, I don't think it's ever going to happen. Maybe Paul Tisdale would depart. I mean, he's the guy who, I believe, recommended Wilfried Nancy to Celtic. So if there is going to be a sacrificial lamb, so to speak, then it could perhaps be Tisdale. The game against Rangers on Saturday gives a lot of people the fear, and it rightly should. If you're Danny Rowe and you're doing your analysis going into this game on Saturday, you are rubbing your hands. Mikey Moore, JD Gassama could have a field day against that Celtic defence when it is left wide open. If you're Danny Rowe, you have the blueprint to go and beat Celtic, and I genuinely wouldn't be surprised. And I think the scenes at Celtic Park on Saturday, if Rangers win that match, could be incredibly ugly. I believe Martin O'Neill might be in the Sky Sports studios for the match as well. That adds just a completely other dynamic to it, which probably is not ideal at this moment in time. But yeah, it's just a dire situation.
I'm seeing some comments in the chat saying it's Paul Tisdale who appointed Wilfried Nancy. I mean, I understand why people are saying that, but it's not the case. Paul Tisdale might have recommended and identified him as potentially coming to Celtic, but the man who appoints managers at Celtic is Dermot Desmond. Yeah. And every Celtic manager of the last 25 years will tell you that. This decision ultimately landed at Dermot Desmond's feet, and he decided that Wilfried Nancy was the man to take Celtic forward.
I think in fairness... I was just going to say, John, in fairness to Dermot Desmond, I think that's one bad appointment in the past however many years. He's before Wilfried Nancy's appointment, a lot of people were kind of looking at Dermot Desmond's track record of appointing Celtic managers, stretching way back to Martin O'Neill. Most of them outside Tony Mowbray were on the whole successes. So this is maybe one miss for him in the space of about 25 years, which is a pretty decent record in fairness.
Yeah, someone else in the chat saying that I said it isn't personal, and they're saying that they think what I'm saying is personal. It isn't. Like, listen, I'm not someone who lurches to these extremes. And actually, I took pelters for suggesting in the wake of the St Mirren game that Wilfried Nancy should get 10 games. And that doesn't look like a particularly good comment in hindsight either. I think you can only go based on the evidence that you see in front of you. I have nothing against Wilfried Nancy. I wanted them to succeed. I want every Celtic manager to succeed. But you cannot argue with what you see on the park at the moment. And for me, he keeps talking about these signs of improvement. I think in an attacking sense, there was some kind of attack and progress against Aberdeen and Livingston. I know you said you felt like maybe Celtic had turned a corner, Josh. I don't think I would quite go that far. I think it was maybe just first steps, first signs of life in an attacking sense. But again, when it's coupled with this such instability and just a leaky defence, an unsure defence, and a side unsure tactically, like, ask yourself the questions that I asked at the top of the show. Is this the worst run of form and performances and results that Celtic have been on in your lifetime? Now, I know there's people older than me. I started going to see Celtic in the Hampden season when they were at Hampden. So for me in my lifetime, this is the worst run of results Celtic have ever been on. Is Wilfried Nancy one of the most unconvincing managers in terms of like media, etc.? Yes, I would argue that he is as well. And is this Celtic team one of the most in disarray tactically that you've ever seen as well? I would argue yes, and I don't think there's really signs that that's clicking into gear either. And so when you take all those three things, the natural conclusion is that this isn't working, and Celtic might have to make a rash decision. Do I want Celtic to be a club, Josh, that sacks a manager after 7 games? Of course not. It fills me with no joy whatsoever that we're in this absurd situation. But we are in this absurd situation, and I don't think it's getting better. So why would you delay what seems an inevitability? You know, it just seems... It's just so frustrating, Josh, that Celtic have managed to put themselves in this position. And again, you're even looking at the weekend that if Celtic beat Rangers, does that change anything going forward for Celtic? Does that change anything about what this manager's going to get out of this current group of players? Is it realistic that Celtic are going to sign 6 or 7 players that radically change the look of this Celtic team? Again, I don't think the answers to any of those questions are positive.
No, I agree with you. I think when you're already in the territory with a manager where he has 1 game to turn it around, then I think you're already in a bad situation and you should probably just pull the trigger already. And because even if Wilfried Nancy beats Rangers on Saturday, he then has to back that up by beating Dundee United the week after, Falkirk the midweek after that, then Auchinleck Talbot. Well, if you're Auchinleck Talbot in the minute, by the way, Super Talbot go ballistic, Celtic are atrocious, could you imagine? So it's so difficult, because even if he wins on Saturday, there will be a vast number of people that still believe that he shouldn't be the Celtic manager, and that's the reality of where he is. And that is simply happening because the majority of the performances since he's been in the door have not been up to scratch. So I think Dundee United, Celtic deserved to win the match. The performance was good. Similarly, Aberdeen, performance was good, won it. Livingston, performance was good, won the game. So that's only 3 out of 7 where the performance has been good. That's less than a 50% ratio at that. And even at that, if your performance is good, it doesn't match the result, and winning is all that matters at Celtic at the end of the day. That's something Martin O'Neill recognised when he came in, and he managed to do that. So yeah, it's difficult for Wilfried Nancy to turn this around now. And I wrote in my report from Tannadice a fortnight ago after that defeat, after 4 defeats in a row, first time in 47 years, that it's difficult at that point to see how Wilfried Nancy was going to turn it around. 2 weeks on, it's still incredibly difficult to see how he's going to turn it around.
Yeah, Charlie McGarvey saying, I'm amazed at the amount of people blaming the manager while letting the board totally off the hook. The board or the minority shareholder appointed him, or the principal shareholder, or however you want to describe Dermot Desmond. Listen, I accept that point of view. Again, I'm not someone who's shied away from that over the last few months either. Been very critical of the Celtic board. At times, I've defended Wilfried Nancy, but I think at some point, again, you have to realise that he is part of the problem, and the issues with the board and the decision makers that put him in place, of course, exist. And actually, what does it say about the Celtic board that if they do have to eventually get rid of Wilfried Nancy quite quickly, It's a terrible indictment of
It's
everything they've
publicly
tried to say
embarrassing.
about themselves over the last 6 months. Our strategy works, everyone's going overboard, all these critics outside the club, the media, the fans, all these unfounded rumours and speculation, and the terrible, situation that Celtic find themselves in terms of the European context. Wilfried Nancy, like they're a Wilfried Nancy sacking away from all of that evaporating even further. Nobody's buying that anyway, Josh. But if they bin this guy within the first 10 matches of his Celtic, managerial reign, it's a terrible indictment of the people running this club and the football expertise that Celtic have in the building.
Yeah, and that's why I personally think they won't do it. It's difficult to foresee them pulling the trigger over the next couple of days, even if Celtic lose on Saturday, because, like I mentioned at the top of the show, they've got the January transfer window that opens in less than 24 hours, and they probably have a list of targets that Wilfried Nancy sanctioned and some maybe moves that might be coming in soon that he is given the green light. So why would they go and sack him? I don't think they'll do it. But remember a couple of months ago now, Dermot Desmond's statement, everything that's wrong at Celtic was due to one individual's desire for self-preservation. How that has aged over the last couple of months, and especially under Wilfried Nancy's reign, has been quite incredible.
That might be true, Josh, but which individual? It might be an accurate statement, but it's not Brendan Rodgers. It might be maybe he needs to take a look in the mirror to see this self-preservation comment. That's again, that feels like the reality of where Celtic sit now. I also understand nobody likes this boom bust. Like, for instance, after the wins over Aberdeen and Livingston, I was very hesitant to say that everything's fixed at Celtic and that Celtic are suddenly a team that's fixed and they're going to go forward in swashbuckling fashion and win the league, because I didn't think it was accurate. I think you try to find what's the reality in this situation, what's the reality behind this emotion around these matches when, he wins, things are going well, and when he loses, everything's a disaster. I think if you take the 7 games in entirety and you look at what's happened in the 7 games as a whole, again, that's where it leads me to the conclusion that this isn't getting better, and is it ever going to get better? And again, if the vibes I was getting from Wilfried Nancy in these media appearances, Josh, or what he was saying was convincing or understandable or gave you any sort of confidence at all that things are being worked on that might see Celtic change in the future, then it might be different. I might be coming on here and saying, listen to him, listen what he's trying to do, this makes sense, this is going forward. But again, there's a real disconnect between what he's saying in these media conferences and what we're actually seeing on the pitch. That's where a major disconnect occurs in all this. And it just adds further fuel to this situation where, no, this guy isn't the right guy.
Yeah, and regardless of what happens in the next couple of games, if it's still Wilfried Nancy in charge, if he beats Rangers and beats Dundee United, he's always going to be one defeat or one draw away from being plunged into the situation that we are currently in just now. And that is the worst thing for him, that he's never going to have the buy-in of all of the support. He might have the backing of the board, but as we know, the support of the most important people in the football club are certainly one of the most important people at the club. And if they're not connected to the manager, then it's just not the ideal situation, and it's not a situation that works. And unfortunately for Wilfried Nancy, he's not setting up a team that is convincing supporters, and never mind pundits. I mean, guys like Michael Stewart, Charlie Mulgrew, Alan Hutton, who were on punditry duty last night, were easily picking holes in that system tactically. I mean, Charlie Mulgrew has admitted himself he failed as a manager at Kelty Hearts, and he's able to come out on his own podcast and then live on Premier Sports to easily pick the holes in Wilfried Nancy's system. And that is, for me, a shocking indictment of the way he's tactically setting up this Celtic side. And everyone can see it, but he still proceeds with this kamikaze style of defending that Rangers could easily open like a hot knife through butter on Saturday.
I was saying, John Ange gave us the blueprint and structure, board lost control, we've gone backwards ever since. I've seen a lot of people comparing Wilfried Nancy to Ange and kind of the first, periods of his reign. Now, 2 things there. Yeah, Ange Postecoglou did have some poor results in that game, but there was also like 6-0 victories early on. There was a European victory away from home and a Europa League qualifier. There were signs that Celtic were getting better under Ange Postecoglou. even in those early stages, even when it was going wrong. And actually, I defended Ange Postecoglou to the hill, even in a dire situation, even after that first 6 Premiership matches where he's lost 3 of them. I was one of the people saying, you've got to give this time. You can see what he's trying to do. Things are working. You can see what the players are trying to enact. Now, the caveat to that as well is that obviously Ange Postecoglou had a full pre-season to embed that, and it was pretty rough in pre-season, and he had time to make adjustments before the competitive game started. Again, that's not an excuse for Wilfried Nancy, it's just the reality. But there's no signs of things getting better for me under Wilfried Nancy, and that's the problem for me. Yes, in attacking sense, some of the combinations have been nice, but as someone pointed out in the chat there, this isn't Real Madrid and Barcelona that Celtic are playing. It was Aberdeen and Livingston, and Aberdeen were down to 10 men for half the game. So it's not as if, it's not as if these are world beaters. And actually, as he said at the top of the show, last night was like, he was talking like Celtic were playing away to a European team in the Europa League or the Champions League in the way that Wilfried Nancy was describing the match. But this was Motherwell, and Motherwell are a decent outfit, but they're not an outfit that Celtic should go into a game not expecting to have a positive result against.
It's a ground that Celtic hadn't lost at since 2013. I was 8 years old the last time Celtic lost.
That's just Josh making everyone feel old, everyone. He is that young.
I was 8 years old the last time Celtic lost at Fir Park, and Wilfried Nancy talks about it after the game as if it was some fixture Celtic should be fearing. Incredible stuff.
Like, where do we go from here? Like, what's actually going to happen, Josh? You said you think he's not going to get sacked. I don't think he is either. I think Celtic are going to dig their heels into an extent after the Rangers game. I don't know. I don't know if, like, it gets to the point of serious concern in terms of toxicity around the football club if Celtic lose to Rangers at the weekend and Wilfried Nancy stays in his post. Surely at that point, Celtic would have to go, listen, we've made a massive mistake here. We're going to try and fix this in the short term and address it.
I think it might depend on the manner of the defeat to Rangers if Celtic lose. So, for example, if Celtic go out and play Rangers and they absolutely batter them, Johnny Kenny misses sitter after sitter, and Rangers run up the park and score a goal in the counter-attack and win 1-0, then maybe, okay, Wilfried Nancy, fair enough, the board would say, yeah, keep him in place. But if Celtic go and lose that match, the manner in which they did to Motherwell last night, then all of a sudden the noise surrounding everything would just be at a level that is so difficult to keep the manager in place. Because there's a week between that Rangers game and the next game against Dundee United in the league at home. That it would be, I think it would be impossible for them to keep Wilfried Nancy if Celtic lose to Rangers on Saturday convincingly. But at the same time, I go back to what I said earlier. January transfer window, it'd be publicly embarrassing for them to do that. So part of me even thinks even if they do lose to Rangers, I don't think they will sack him.
Yeah, I have my doubts too. And then, like, what's the alternative? You mentioned Martin O'Neill there. A lot of people would welcome him back, but I mean, again, it's not ideal, is it? Saying to a manager, no, we don't want you. I'll see you later. By the way, we do want you. We're going to get you back in. I mean, that's
such a bad look.
Yeah.
The only saving grace is Martin O'Neill said on TalkSport a couple of weeks ago that if he was asked again, he would happily come back to the club. So I think if they did ask Martin O'Neill to take the interim job until the end of the season, he would probably take it. A lot of people would probably think that Martin O'Neill would be the silver bullet to turn this Celtic season around and help them go on to win the league.
Yeah.
If you look
I don't actually believe that, Josh, either. I don't like, and what you're doing, you're just kicking the can down the road. Until the summer. Like, what is the long-term plan here at Celtic? Wilfried Nancy was the guy they've picked to enact a long-term vision at Celtic that they should be on the verge of ready to rip up after 7 games. That's just, it's unfathomable that Celtic have put themselves in this position. Regina Mundaskin, so the players get a pass they didn't try last night. No, absolutely not at all. I think the Celtic players have not covered themselves in glory at all here. I think there could have been more buy-in on the way that Wilfried Nancy is trying to play football. And I think at times you've seen that. I don't think it's great what's coming from the players at all now, Josh. Just what they're saying, how they're playing at times. But again, the responsibility falls on Wilfried Nancy to have that convincing methods to get these players to buy in. They're not buying in, and I'm not excusing them, but they're also not being inspired to give everything they can either. The players were really poor last night, Josh, and I don't think anyone in that team or that squad can escape criticism at the moment. I can't think of a single person in that squad that you can go, right, you can give a free pass to him, he's doing all right.
Yeah, I can't think of a single player who played in green and white last night who gets pass marks for their performance. I always say on here that the least you ask of a Celtic player is fight, passion, and desire. None of them showed any of that last night. I think the most fight and passion you got from Kasper Schmeichel is when he was moaning at defenders for the mistakes. He obviously gave away a goal himself. So yeah, the players in this whole situation obviously deserve a lot of criticism too. What I find interesting, I mean, the players, like you say, they're speaking in the media, their comments aren't convincing at all. Since Wilfried Nancy's been in charge, so Callum McGregor spoke to the media before the Hearts game, Wilfried Nancy's first game. After that, correct me if I'm wrong here, John, I think he's made the one media appearance, and it was in the Sky Sports interview after the game against Livingston at the weekend, which is really, really strange. Obviously, he's had the links to Saudi. As the captain of the club, after you lose and after you drop points, especially after a cup final defeat, he is normally the guy who's always there, always speaking. When you have a mixed zone, he's more often than not there talking to the media. I find that very strange as well.
It is, yeah. He did that Sky Sports interview recently. I think he also did a pre-match interview on Celtic TV shortly. I maybe before the St Mirren game. I can't remember exactly, but he did it on Celtic TV as well. But you're totally right. He often appears much more in the media and has a lot more to say about the situation at Celtic and what's going on. I can only surmise that he doesn't want to do it, or he's been protected from that for some reason. And again, as the captain of the club, I don't think he should be protected from anything. I think if Callum McGregor has negative things to say or has his point of view to put across, I think he should be allowed to do that. Again, I'm not naive. I understand that how PR works and understand that Celtic always want to put a positive face on things, but Celtic fans would certainly like to hear the true opinion of Callum McGregor. And actually, I think I don't have much time for like a PR facade, Josh. I think players and managers and everyone at football clubs should speak pretty openly and honestly, unless you don't want anyone to give away a negotiation leverage or a competitive advantage by speaking too candidly in the media. But you like to hear the truth of things. And actually, I think there's not been enough of that over the last while at Celtic across the board, players, managers, whoever. You've rarely got into the truth of what's actually going on. And again, for a football club that's so underpinned by the financial support of supporters, then it's a difficult situation to be in.
Yeah, and I think it's the least the fans deserve in the situation that Celtic currently are. 5 defeats in 7, that they hear from the captain, one of the key leader in the dressing room, who's playing every week, playing almost every minute under Wilfried Nancy. They get his perspective on things and what he thinks. So yeah, I think it's very strange that he's not made a media appearance. Listen, he might do the pre-match for Rangers at the weekend because he often always does pre-match stuff when Celtic play Rangers. But just need to wait and see.
Yeah, so just for clarity, because I know over the festive period the press conference dates can be a little bit disjointed, but there is a Friday press conference, at least was on the schedule ahead of the festive period. So player and the manager are expected to speak ahead of Rangers in that Friday press conference on the 2nd of January. I don't know, mate. It's grim, as they say. So this isn't the way we want to be ending 2025, everyone. We wanted to be ending far more positively than this. Celtic have lost 17 matches across the calendar year, Josh. It's hard to imagine. And again, you look back, Celtic did win a trophy this year. They did win the league. They did win silverware. There was a bit of joy around Celtic. There was a bit of hope with regard to Europe that was then quickly dissipated by the end of the summer. You're looking ahead into 26. How can Celtic be the best version of themselves? It's not this version of Celtic, Josh. There needs to be a radical overhaul, I think, at all aspects, all levels of the club for Celtic to even start to move forward. And unfortunately, right now, it looks like the thing that will have the most direct impact is installation of a new coaching team because they're not getting in and out of these players. But what else do you want to see a Celtic moving into the new year? Surely 2026 can't be worse than 2025.
As Mick McCarthy would say, it can. I think even 2025, the league title triumph, like you spoke of, turned out, at least in my opinion, how I felt it, to be a bit of a damp squib because Celtic stuttered over the line. Obviously, they had that chance to win it at Celtic Park against Kilmarnock. What a great day that would have been. But they lost to St Johnstone the week before, and that opportunity was snatched away from them. And the performances towards the end of that season were not great. So they started over the line in the end. They won the league fully a damn squib. Going into 2026, I think there needs to be, like you said, a drastic overhaul at the club. People who are running the club, people who are in charge of transfers, recruitment. Just take a look at Motherwell, for example, the players they signed, the likes of Elijah Just, plucking him from obscurity. People like Tawanda Maswanise, Elliot Watt, who they signed on data. They have a forward-thinking approach. If Celtic could have some of that with the resources they've got, wow, what they could do, what this club could become, because it has such a potential to be a certain position and a certain standing in European football. It is nowhere near it. At the minute, Celtic are clinging on to a Europa League playoff knockout round place. That is nowhere near the potential that Celtic can reach. Domestically as well, they're miles off it too. But I fear the worst for Celtic in 2026. I really do. I hate to be negative, but I base my opinions on reality and evidence. And based on said evidence and reality, I struggle to see how 2026 is going to be a successful year.
Comment from Fanatic here that I agree with. Sorry, these players do not deserve to be mollycoddled by O'Neill if he came back. They need moved on. Simple. I agree with aspects of that. That's if Martin O'Neill did come back and suddenly the players feel comfortable again. I don't think that's necessarily a thing you want to reinforce either. I don't think players necessarily have to be in their comfort zone to be successful at Celtic and have to, as you say, mollycoddled to an extent. That's not how it should function either. They should be challenged, but they should also be happy with the processes that they're working through. So even if it's challenging and they're striving and they're pushing forward, they have to be happy with the processes in place that are getting the best of them. Are they happy with the processes at the moment? I would suggest not, unfortunately. Anything else you want to cover before we head off for the year, Josh, and say goodbye to this wretched festive period for Celtic?
Yeah, I can't think of much, to be honest, John, because it's been so dire recently. Really fear the worst for the game on Saturday. I think it's going to be a difficult afternoon for Celtic against Rangers, which is really weird to say against a Rangers team who have not been great in recent weeks. They're churning out victories, yes, but the performances haven't really been there. They created a lot against Motherwell, but St Mirren missed a penalty at Ibrox last night, and then they scored after that, so Rangers are hanging on at the end. And that's a sad indictment of the way Celtic are, that a lot of people are fearing going in to face this Rangers side on Saturday. So, yeah, that's my final thought for 2025.
Listen, we appreciate everyone's support throughout this calendar year. It's been my first year at the Celtic Way, and I've appreciated all the support along the way, and the coverage and the kind of the audience for the shows and the website and subscribers. And if you fancy subscribing to the YouTube channel, it is free. You just need to click the button. You get notifications for all our videos going forward. If you fancy subscribing to the website and all the, we talk about all the issues that Celtic, good or bad, whether it's going well, Celtic are on a run of 20 games undefeated, or whether they're on this current run. We take, as Josh says there, we take each issue as it comes and try to look at it with a kind of balanced reality about what the situation is. Unfortunately, for me, that balanced reality at the moment is not a good thing for Celtic. But if you fancy subscribing to the website, then please feel free to do so. Just a word from our sponsors as well. Simply Furniture have sponsored us in the latter half of 2025, and we appreciate their support as always. They're an independent furniture brand based in Hillington, Glasgow, dedicated to bringing luxury and contemporary style into homes across the UK. They have a dedicated team to ensure your furniture is delivered with care right to your doorstep. They have a showroom in Hillington, Glasgow, and if you visit that showroom and mention the Celtic Way, you will get a special in-store discount. Links below to their website and social pages as always. We're wrapping up 2025 here. There is a show tomorrow, a pre-recorded show with Tony and Ryan. They won't be live on New Year's Day. They will get a day off. Everyone does get a day off. And then we're back on Friday as well to have more of a preview of the Rangers game and talk about some of the details and aspects around that. Again, Josh, at this time of year, we'd usually be talking about the transfer window and like what Celtic are planning. I just feel like things are so in flux at the moment that it's hard, it's impossible to pin down the direction Celtic are heading in the transfer window. But we do have news and transfer news and all that sort of thing on the website, celticway.co.uk as well. So stay tuned to that if you need to. Thanks everyone for joining us in the live chat today. It's been a busy one. Unfortunately, at times it can be busy because things have gone badly. Leave your thoughts in the comments below as well. Let us know how you feel about Celtic at the moment. Again, we appreciate all your support, and we'll see you again in the new year next time on the Celtic Way.